This video is going to be a little bit different than my normal game mechanism videos. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about a game design that I tried to figure out, and I couldn't get it. I couldn't get it right, which was a bit of a struggle, a bit of a disappointment. It's something I kept secret for a while because this was an IP that I was after. This is one of my favorite books, book series period ever. It's called the Red Rising series. It's kind of a mix of sci-fi within our solar system, so it's future, but not I guess it's pretty far future, but not all that. Like, it's not too distant from our reality. There's a lot of social commentary in the book. There's a dystopian element to it, and honestly, I don't want to spoil it. I absolutely think it's worth reading if you have not read the Red Rising series. I would recommend not even reading anything about it. Just give it a try. Read a few pages if you like it, because it opens up in a way that was completely unexpected to me, and each book really stands by itself as being really special. But definitely start with Red Rising. Anyway, so I've loved this book, and last fall I've actually contacted the author twice. I contacted the author about 3.5 years ago now, and asked. Oh, I contacted his agent and asked Pierce's agent, Hannah. I asked if the tabletop game rights were available. And at the time, they were wrapped up in trying to get a movie deal, and so they said they weren't interested. So I contacted him again this fall because it kept this is the IP that I want. I know Star Wars is awesome, Lord of the Rings is awesome. Those are huge IPs. I commend companies for getting those IPs, but for me, this was the one. I really wanted Red Rising, and so I contacted Hannah again this past fall, and I said, my company has done a lot since I last contacted you. I think this is my passion project. I really want to make this happen, and I think I could bring Red Rising to gamers who have never heard of it, and that would feel good to me to bring this property I love, this story I love, to other gamers. And they responded. Hannah responded positively, and Pierce responded, which was really cool to email a little bit with Pierce, the author, and have a conversation with them about what a game could be. It was just a very brief conversation. Pierce has played some games, but it sounds like he's not a huge gamer. But he has played a few games, more video games, I think, than tabletop games. And so he kind of gave me his vision for it, which was I outlined a few different ideas, and the one that he gravitated towards was one that captured the feeling of the books, and the books are very. That they're broad and epic in scope, but they're also very personal. You see most things through the eyes of one character, maybe sometimes a few other characters, but mainly one character. So you feel very tied to this character and the people around this main character. So we wanted epic in scope, but also very personal, and definitely capture the feeling of the books. Also tie in the idea that the society that this entire world is built on. And the society, there's a lot of social commentary around the society where it's essentially a caste system of colors, but not in the skin tones that we associate with races today. But this is a new version of humanity, like a genetically engineered advancement in humanity. But as part of that advancement, people were divided into these castes, these different colors, and so they're the lowest on the bottom are the reds, and at the top are the golds, and everything else in between, and everyone kind of has their place in society. So we wanted the author was interested in having that society ingrained into the book, but also have players represent characters or maybe houses in the books, and have some sort of conquest element to it, because there is this element in the books of controlling the world, whether you're controlling the media or actually the controlling land and territory with military, controlling the economy, all these different ways that in real life we try to control other people, but also definitely in this futuristic vision of the world. And so I set off to design this game, and I intended to send Pierce and Hannah a prototype in December of 2017. So I had about 2 months to work on this, and I figured 2 months, that's enough to get at least not a first prototype, but an early prototype that I was confident was representative of the game. I knew it would need a lot of playtesting after that, but I was confident I could get them something at that point. And so I worked through a ton of ideas, and I finally I got one to the table actually pretty quickly. It was a deck building game, and I'll go into this more in a second. But I started with a deck building game, and I guess almost long story short, I'm now making this video in April. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I shared on Instagram and on Facebook that kind of this story. I shared that I had been trying to design this game, and I had gone through 4 different iterations from start to finish. And from start to finish, I don't mean the entire design process. I mean that I brainstormed, designed a game, created a prototype, and play tested it. And each time I did this from start to finish, 4 completely different games, and none of them worked. And after the 4th one, the most recent one, it was one where I just kind of said, this is just not, it's not happening. As badly as I want this to happen, it's just not happening. And so I shared a piece of artwork that I had commissioned for what I hoped would be the future game with people. And the response has actually been pretty cool because A, I've heard from people who love the books, which I always love to hear. And B, I've heard from people who maybe aren't familiar with the books, but they liked the art that I shared, and they liked the idea behind the books. Maybe they read a recap or something, and it sounded like some people, probably if you're watching this video, you may have liked the design challenge of designing a game in this world, a challenge that I could not meet myself. I was not up to this challenge. And so it sounds like there might be designers out there who might attempt to design a Red Rising game, and I would be honored if any of you are listening to this, that if you get to a place where you think that you've created a game that is evocative of the books and the world and maybe some of the characters in this world, and it's a fun game, fun, unique, interesting game, meets our submission guidelines. That's an important thing. I'll post a link to that below. That's a big deal. This isn't just about the book. This is, if you're going to submit to Stonemaier Games, at least it's got to meet our submission guidelines. It's possible that some of you will create something really cool and submit it to us, and I can continue that conversation with Pierce and Hannah, which would be awesome. Anyway, the whole point of this video, beyond that story, is that I wanted to talk a little bit about the things that I tried that didn't work. And there's a big caveat that I want to say with this. I tried these things, and it doesn't mean that you can't get them to work. I tried a pretty wide variety of mechanisms, and there are games that use these mechanisms really, really well. So it's not that these mechanisms don't work. It's not that this theme doesn't work. It's just that I could not figure it out. But it also doesn't mean that if you hear one of these mechanisms that you should, doesn't mean that you should just dismiss one of them because I couldn't get it to work. And it also doesn't mean that you should aim for one of these mechanisms just because I found it appealing. Clearly what I was doing was not working, and so you should pick what works for you and what works for this game. So the first version of the game, there's actually a version I brainstormed but never actually tested, which was about Meeple Drafting, kind of a Meeple Circus style drafting, where you get a bunch of meeples on the table and you take turns drafting them. And these meeples would be different colors. One of the 14 different colors in the caste system in this world. You'll be drafting those meeples and using those meeples to build up your empire or just activate things that are already in your empire. And that was something I played around with a lot with this game. Are you actually building up to something, or are you already there? Are you a gold who's already in control of a decent chunk of this world, and you're just deciding how much bigger you want to be, or you're deciding how can I optimize this little piece of the world that I have? Because the books aren't really, there's one character that's kind of building up, and he's building up himself, and he's building up something. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read the books, but he's building something. But for the most part, this society is built. It's done. The books aren't about building something new. So I didn't want to take a direction that was too far away from the books. Anyway, I brainstormed the Meeple Drafting thing. Never got to a place where I was satisfied, where I thought it would be interesting. I had tons of ideas that didn't get to the table. But the first idea that I did have that got to the table was a deck building game. Different cards had different either specific characters on them or more the generic characters like pinks. Pink is a cast color in this world, and so you get a pink card and that would do a certain thing. And we all know that deck building can be quite funny and quite great, but I couldn't get it to work. And I'm going to say this a lot in this video, and it's tough for me to describe, partially because I've gone through so many iterations of this, but also, and so I partially just don't remember. But also, I don't, if I knew what didn't work, and I knew there was an answer for it, I would have already fixed it. I wouldn't be talking about it today. So it's a little hard to pinpoint what about it didn't work. But I learned a lot about deck building in this process because I moved on to a bag building version. Version 2 was bag building. I love Orleans, so I thought Orleans does this job of bag building really well, where you get some weaker meeple types, some weaker colors, and you advance. You use those. You draw them out of your bag, and you get some new meeples that are more powerful. That do different things, and I started to recognize, and that didn't work either. That playtest was a disaster. But I started to realize that one of the big challenges with this world is that, and why I think deck building could work, but bag building may not work, is that there are so many colors in this world. There are 14 different colors that are part of this special society in Red Rising, and 14 has a lot of unique abilities to attribute with meeples, where there's no text on a meeple. It's just it's an actual token, and to have all those meeples mean different things and be meaningful and be interesting and offer different paths to victory. Sometimes I felt like I was like stretching out the game too much to meet what this world has, like stretching out, thinning out the mechanisms to make it work. Like, for example, there are obsidians and grays in this world, and grays are police and military, and obsidians are kind of mercenaries and military elite, and so they're pretty similar to grays. Like, these two colors are fairly similar. There are other colors that also oranges and greens. Greens are the scientists, oranges are engineers and technicians, and thematically that makes sense in this world, that they do different things, but in a game those are often kind of similar. They do similar things. And like the reds are the lowest. The reds are just there to mine for helium-3, a special resource in this world, which I often abstracted in the game to money. They were the ones that were generating just a little bit of money at a time. They were like the base, the things that you started out with, the people that you started out with. So anyway, I couldn't get that second bag building didn't work. And so third, we tried a new mechanism that I actually thought was pretty cool. This was my co-founder's idea, Alan. Where it was a cascading mechanism. So basically, it was still meeple building, but there were these random arrays. Each player had this 3-part player mat, and you could put your meeples on certain parts of that player mat, and you would activate. And so I'll try to help you out. I should have gotten visuals for this video, but on one end, were the reds, and the other end were the golds, and in between were different colors and different rows. And if you put a gold token down, it would activate everything in the row before it, as if the gold, it kind of to represent how powerful the golds are in this world, but also to represent all the people those golds control. So if you place a gold and he's in the same row as a green and a purple and a gray and then a red, because reds are always in every row in this mechanism, and the gold will get all of those abilities when you place it, which is a cool mechanism. I actually liked that cascading idea, but it started to, you'll see this like with this one and the last one, as we worked towards these, or as I worked towards these more unique mechanisms, the more distant I got from the game. So as you can tell from the way I described that, I was thinking about the world and the theme and creating that mechanism, but it didn't feel immersive at all. And this is a truly immersive world. So that was something I really started to struggle with. How can I create a unique mechanism or unique set of mechanisms, but still be highly evocative and immersive into this world? So so that cascading thing, I discarded that and I gave it one more try. This was the playtest I did this past Wednesday. Where I started from scratch again and designed. Now I'm blanking on it. What was the last one? I just did it. Oh, this was an I cut you choose mechanism with tableau building. So in this version, there were. And actually, I should go back and mention in the first version of the game there was area control, and I really didn't enjoy the area control, so I got rid of it. I never returned to area control after that. In this latest version, I used a pretty neat track mechanism that I liked. There were 4 different circular tracks that I think could be they could be planets in the game because there are all different planets and orbitals in play in this world. A lot of the action happens on Mars, but there are also other planets that do stuff. Each of these round tracks represented a planet, and they had a track going around it, and that track gave you instant bonuses, and at the end of the game it was majority scoring, so a little bit like area control. And in the middle of the track was a random piece that was put in the middle that determined your current ability to do stuff, like how many cards can you draw at the end of your turn. And as you advance on the outer track, you also advance on that inner track that was randomized. So each game, that inner track could be associated with different outer tracks. And the cards in the game that you're gaining, some of them help you advance on those tracks. There was a space combat mechanism, and there was a dueling mechanism. Those are 2 things that I really tried to fit into all these games, because in this world there are big space battles. There are some big ground battles, and there are also some very memorable duels just between 2 people. And so I wanted to try to capture some of that stuff. Even though the books aren't about war is always imminent, and it's always there's always the possibility of war, or war is kind of happening. There's a battle somewhere. And so I didn't, as much as I am not a combat-oriented designer or gamer, I wanted to try to bring that into the world. There are lots of different cool spaceships. There could be cool miniatures, and we started. The artist Justin created some pretty cool concept art for the miniatures, what the miniatures could have been, and there's also a lot of descriptions of cool technology in this world that most of the technology influences combat. So that I thought that technology could enhance the duels and be part of the duels. And the duels also, I like the duels because they put you in one character's body for a second. You're fighting one person instead of zooming out and looking at a giant space battle where it's cool strategically, but you don't feel like you're in the body of a character in this world. And so the other part of this mechanism, this latest game, was an I cut you choose mechanism, where at the beginning of every turn you would choose 2 cards from your hand, and you would put them face up on the table, and the player to your right would choose one of them to put into their tableau, and you would take the other, put it in your tableau, and then you would activate a certain number of cards in your tableau based on your status on one of the tracks. So the default was activate 2 of those cards. This version of the game, the I cut you choose tableau ability with the tracks, this was definitely the best of all the versions of the game that I made. But similar to version 3, as much potential as this version had, and I think it has potential to be a game, or at least for some of those mechanisms to be used in a different game or games. It didn't make me feel like I was in the Red Rising world at all. Even though the names of the ships were on the cards, the colors were on the cards, there were character names on the cards, like all this stuff was on there. And you know how people talk about themes being pasted on? This was the opposite of that. The theme is not pasted on to this prototype, but it still felt that way. Even me, the designer, who put the mechanisms onto the theme and I know that it wasn't a pasted on theme, it still felt that way, and I still felt detached from the theme. So that's the overarching problem with these prototypes that I struggled with. There was either I would either have a game that was evocative of the theme and immersive into this world, but was mechanically boring or derivative or just not interesting, or I would have some of these interesting mechanisms that really had potential, but they were so they didn't feel immersive at all. They didn't feel like the theme was really there. And so that was when I decided to I guess not totally give up. I don't want to give up on this game, and that's why I'm excited about this video and excited that other designers might be excited about this. It might create something cool for it. And I sent 2 emails to Pearson Hanna. I sent one saying on Wednesday, or after Wednesday, maybe Thursday, I said, it's been an honor to work on this. Thank you for your patience. I've spent an incredible amount of time on this trying to get this to work, and I couldn't. And I don't want to publish a game that is subpar just because I love the theme. And I think that the books deserve better than that. And so thank you for the opportunity, but it didn't work out. And I did add, if they ever have another game designer come to them and say that they have a game for Red Rising, that maybe they could refer them to Stonemaier Games, because I would love to publish a Red Rising game. And so I told that to them. And then after I saw this interest from designers, probably some of you who are watching this, I sent another email just to put it out there that that I might come back to them in a few months, and I might say, someone submitted to us a wonderful Red Rising game that I believe is true to this world and is a lot of fun and is interesting and could stand out in the world, the very busy world of board games. And so they know I might hear from them. I haven't heard back from either Pierce or Hannah. They're probably busy. Maybe they're a little miffed that I took so long to get them a design. We'll see. I don't know. But that's the story of my attempt to get Red Rising to work. And if you can get it to work, I'd love to see what you can do. Let me think. I've answered a bunch of questions on the threads recently, so I want to see if there's anything that I should mention. So as I mentioned earlier on, one of the reasons that I want to make a Red Rising game is that I want to bring this world to gamers. I want to introduce the book to gamers who haven't heard of it. And so I don't want the game to spoil everything about the books. And so my plan was, if I did have, there was a version that had mission cards that had specific events that happened in the books, but they didn't specify like which character was doing the thing. So it was like launch a star shell into an opposing spaceship, which is, I won't spoil it, but that there's a few important scenes where people, there's like ship-to-ship combat that becomes very hand-to-hand combat as part of that ship-to-ship combat. And so like the mission was evocative. It mentioned what something that happened in the book, but without being super specific and spoilery. And also I considered the idea of including booster packs inside the game that would say something like, after you've read book 1, open this pack and reveal these new missions, these new characters that would have spoiled things if I told you them before the start of the game. So this is part of what I'm thinking about. Like, I don't want to spoil the books, but I also want them to be true to the books, and the way that I showcase content in the game is, or whoever designs it can keep that in mind. So I don't want to hit like specific plot points in the game. The whole idea of being epic in scale but very personal, that's really important. What else? As some people asked, should they be worried about the budget or production costs or anything like that? And the answer is no. Don't look at our submission guidelines. Again, definitely look at Stonemaier Games submission guidelines to see what we're looking for in a game. But don't think it like I'll take care of all the production costs and all that stuff. I'll figure that out. One of the things in our submission guidelines is to have hooks. So have a mechanical hook that isn't in another game. Have the idea of a component hook that will draw players in, whether it's like a cool miniature or metal coins, custom dice, that kind of stuff. Those types of component hooks. Someone also asked, like, would we be kickstarting this? And you probably know, if you know my company, that we don't use Kickstarter at all anymore. Our last Kickstarter was in 2015, and I effectively have permanently given up using Kickstarter. I've stopped using it. We just publish things a more traditional way, but still, I try to launch things the same way I did on Kickstarter. Like, I tried to build community around things, build a lot of awareness, put a lot into the art, and Charterstone was our first game that was after Kickstarter. There were expansions that were followed, but as you probably know from Charterstone, the components are the same as you'd get in like a premium version of a Kickstarter game, but it's in the retail version of the game. That's what I'm aiming for in this game. Let me see if there are any other questions that I'm scrolling through here. Someone asked, what about an RPG? We don't. This needs to be a tabletop game. We're not going to publish an RPG. I don't want to discourage you from making a Red Rising RPG. That would be awesome, but we're not going to publish it. Let's see. Also, something that kept coming up. It seemed like people didn't quite realize that it's really important to read the books. Like, don't just read the Wikipedia page and get an idea for it. That might, I mean, that can spark some ideas, but if you want to design this game, you got to spend the next month reading all the books to fully understand what the books are about. I'm essentially asking you to fall in love with the world of Red Rising just as I have, and then design a game based on it. Yeah. And I know that's a unique task, and some of you might not be up for it. That's okay. Maybe you'll just read a good book, and that'll be good enough. Competitive versus cooperative. The author Pierce did indicate that he wants it to be a competitive game, not a cooperative game. And I would much prefer it to not be scenario or mission based. I know those are ways, kind of like almost the default way of integrating a strong theme and specific moments into a game, but I don't think that works as well here. I'd rather have a game, just a regular board game that you play, then you reset, and then you play again, and yeah, not where you're doing different scenarios or missions. And I think part of that is that my guess is that many gamers are not familiar with this series, and while missions and scenarios can work for that, I'd rather them experience that stuff through the books, not through the game. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions in the comments. Oh yeah, one other thing. Some of you contacted me privately with questions, which I appreciate. I mean, it shows that you're passionate about it. But obviously, I'm trying to bring this in a public forum. Like, all of my posts have been public. I'm not privately emailing with some people and not with other people. I don't want to have an inequity there. If you have a question, ask it in public, and I will gladly answer it. And if I miss it, it doesn't mean I'm ignoring it. Maybe I just didn't see it because there are a lot of questions. Feel free to tag me, and I'm sure I'll see it. But I'll definitely see any comments in this video. Thanks for listening to me ramble on this very weird video. If you're used to my normal series, I know this is way out there. But yeah, this is the story of how I tried to design a game that I really, really wanted to design, and I couldn't get it to work. But maybe there's a little bit of light, a little bit of hope that one of you will figure it out. Thank you, good luck, and I look forward to your creations, hopefully in a few months. Take care.